Where information never sleeps. In your hands, so when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey.
To affect it happening or not happening.
Trust Lyme disease
and astrology. Witnessing those who harm and holding them accountable.
Guess what? No more secrets. It's about time we snap out of it. This corporate government is a house of cards falling in on itself. The public law. Do no harm.
Testing. Test.
It's about time we snap out of it. This corporate government is a house of cards falling in on itself. The public law. Do no harm.
Testing. Test.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit HeartDrive 877-928-8822.
Test.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. I've got Solon and I've got Stephen on the line here, and I'm going to go a little bit solo just for a few minutes here. I want to talk, unfortunately, about a very disturbing thing that happened this week, and in terms of the Meier prophecies and the Meier information, I think it's kind of a turning point. I think that we have gone down the line of degeneracy to such a degree I don't know if it's possible for us to come back. I want to talk about the illegal and the immoral arrest of Roger Stone, but let me give you a little background in what's called Operation Mockingbird, which was a large-scale program in the Central Intelligence Agency that started back in the 1950s. And they were attempting to manipulate the news media for propaganda purposes. And interestingly, they funded a lot of student organizations and cultural organizations and magazines, and I think they're still doing that. Project Mockingbird, it goes on today, and it seems to me that the people on the left are probably the biggest victims. And this is a kind of social engineering that's designed to change our mindsets. And what I see is the mainstream media is now controlled by the deep state entirely. And it's trying to create divisions in the United States now. And these divisions are really not so bad as that's been led on. I mean, we have differences in race, differences in politics, differences in gender. But really what the mainstream media is doing is really hyping these up. It's creating artificial divisions that really aren't there. We're creating these conflicts between genders and race, and there's a hypersensitivity that's developing among the public, and I think that the Meier information can shed some light on what that is. And I believe there's a kind of a dark, evil force that is stirring up people in the United States so that we have conflict with one another. The enemies of the United States are now controlling the mainstream media. They're using it as a tool to bring in a civil war or some kind of government-sponsored tyranny. And I know Billy has talked about us having 2 civil wars here in the United States. Well, this week, dozens of heavily armed agents of the FBI raided Roger Stone's house. They did it at 4 a.m. Somebody said there was 27 agents. It was a lot. And most of these agents, they were wearing body armor. They were carrying high-powered rifle. They scrambled over his lawn, and they just about pounded his door down. Now, Stone appeared barefoot. He was wearing a T-shirt, and he was worried about his wife, who is deaf, and he was worried that his dogs might be killed, and he has 3 cats, and he was worried about them some too. So what I'm saying is there is no need to raid the homes of people like Roger Stone. Roger has no history of violence. He has not been charged with murder. Roger Stone is accused of lying during the Russia investigation. And I would argue that these charges against Stone are basically nonsense. And they're designed to destroy him financially. And President Donald Trump came out this week and called it the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. So why is this arrest of Roger Stone a witch hunt? Well, to me, this is really just a part of the war against free speech. And, for example, Roger Stone's consulting work has dried up because he's been censored and shadow banned on Facebook. The real intent here is to wear him down financially, make him broke. They've done the same thing to Dr. Jerome Corsi. They've kicked Alex Jones off of Facebook, off of YouTube. Roger Stone is potentially facing $2 million in legal fees. So he cannot pay his health benefits anymore. He can't afford his life insurance anymore. This whole indictment is really a fabrication. Roger Stone, he's 66 years old. He's not a flight risk. He's a public figure. There's no need to bring all of this force against him. In fact, how was CNN notified and ready to film all of this at about 4 a.m. this morning? So let me pull in. Let me ask you, Stephen and Solon, have you guys been following this at all?
Well, this is news to me, actually.
Really?
I've not been, I guess you can say I don't follow the mainstream media, so I tend to not hear about some of this.
Well, I think in this case, it's probably good. Stephen, what are your thoughts? You there? I think he's muted. Stephen, you're muted, perhaps? I don't know. Well, we're not hearing. There you are. Is that you?
Oh, no, that's me. I unmuted.
Okay. Well, I'll just leave that for what it is right now. It's very disturbing to me because I interviewed Roger Stone about 3 years ago before I switched over to the Meier material exclusively. And I interviewed him. I bought his book called Clinton's War on Women. Boy, it was a wake-up call to me. I had no idea how corrupt our government was until I read that book. And like I said, I interviewed him, had him on the show, and then I actually bought the audio version of the book and listened to that while I was driving back and forth. So anyway, I really think we're at a point where the abuse of power in the United States is over the top. So how are we going to deal with this, and why is this happening? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about this, and this I'll probably go monologue for just a little while, guys, and then we'll allow you to jump in, because I'd like to have a discussion on this. Page 224 of the Might of Thoughts says, "This is a contrast to entangled ideas confuse the thoughts and abruptly go from one extreme to another, whereby a misdirection of the thoughts arises, which triggers emotions and can even lead to murder and manslaughter." And I don't know if I talked about this or mentioned this. Oh, it looks like I got an older version of my notes up here. Well, there is more and more threats coming out from the left. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but for example, some of you may have witnessed the thing that took place in front of Washington, D.C. with the boys from Kentucky who were just standing there on a set of steps waiting for their bus, and then they had this kind of cultish black Israelite group which was calling these kids from a Catholic school in Kentucky, was calling them incest babies and all this other horrific stuff. And then in comes this Native American group right in between the two of them, and walks right up. This one guy walks right up in front of this young boy and is pounding his drum, right in his face. It was, and then all of these people were triggered, saying, "Oh my, isn't that terrible what that boy did to that poor Indian guy?" Well, they didn't see the whole story, evidently. So it was. We're in a time of great strife, and I think we're in a time of great trouble. But that's just where we are right now, and it's very, very disturbing. So the verse in the Might of Thoughts that I just read is really important to understand, because we have something called ideas, IDEAS, and these are notions that are unripe. They're not completely developed, and this is what hangs us up. And you can always tell when you're being influenced by an unripe idea, because it will always trigger your emotions. And this is something I have to do when engaging myself. If something, for example, at work is bothering me, it's starting to trigger emotions, then I know there's some aspect of my own thinking that isn't complete, that is wrong, that needs to be developed a little bit more. So Billy says this is a contrast to entangled ideas, confuse the thoughts. So ideas, IDEAS, are incompletely developed factors, which we need to thoroughly contemplate. People get caught up in ideas and they're not able to get free of them. And notice that in this case, the thoughts are not organized at all. In fact, these ideas become tangled. And when this condition arises, there's kind of a frantic behavior. I noticed this in myself too. So in the earlier passage I was talking about, what Billy's doing here is he's showing the cause and effect relationship between these thoughts and what they trigger. They trigger other thoughts, they trigger feelings, they trigger emotion. For example, he says that tangled ideas confuse the thoughts. So tangled ideas are the cause and effect of that is the confusion in our thinking. So the tangled idea is the cause, the effect is the confusion in the thoughts. And then when your thoughts go abruptly to extreme, have you ever felt yourself do that? Get really angry with a person and say, oh my goodness, I can't feel that way. And then you're really angry again. So this is the thoughts going abruptly to extremes. And this can cause a misdirection where the thoughts will just go way off on a tangent. And that'll trigger the emotion, which can lead to an effect of violence, murder and manslaughter. So what we're seeing here is the law of causality, cause and effect. So the tangled ideas, a tangle means to be twisted together, to be untidy, to be confused, to be jumbled up, to be messy, to be chaotic. Tangled can mean to bring together into a mass of confusedly interlaced or intertwined twisted threads. That's about me when I wake up in the morning and I'm sitting there trying to drink that cup of coffee, and my thoughts are a tangled, twisted mass, a snarl, and they're not in order. So I have to go through trying to rehabilitate my thinking, which for some reason gets totally shot at night. I don't know what happens. So when we have confusion, we're not able to think clearly. We're bewildered. There's a disorder in our consciousness. And this includes the loss of linear thinking. And your thoughts tend to go from one extreme to another. Love and hate, love and hate. In other words, you hate the person you love. It's crazy thoughts. And this causes, absurd things, misdirection of thoughts. The emotions can be triggered. And if you've gone too far, literally murder and manslaughter. So the left now is causing for violence, and probably some people on the right too. But so what happens is you have no room in your thinking for virtue and rationality at this point. They're gone. Poof, gone. You cannot really set a zeal. You cannot imagine a zeal. These concepts become foreign. Remember, a zeal is a life determination. So only the ideas can be followed. What we're trying to do is convert the idea, which is unripe, into an ideal, which is completely thought through. So, but when people get trapped in ideas, they cannot get free from them. I.e., the person that's the alcoholic, the person that's maybe the cocaine addict, or maybe the sex addict or whatever, he cannot get free from them. So anyway, an idea must be thoroughly contemplated, and you got to work it through. And you got to start to recognize the values and the unvalues. So unvalues can require months or even years to change for the better. Your unvalues can be programmed into your subconsciousness. That's why I repeat so much to myself, to unprogram those unvalues. So we have to handle the values and the unvalues, and we have to direct our life towards evolutive striving. So we've got to gain values from ideas, and you create what's called an evolutive attitude, and you start to conform to that evolutive attitude. So ideas, I-D-E-A-S, they're formed into ideals. You start to bring them to fruition. And I have that list of things I say to myself. I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic, I'm the master of my own destiny, etc. That creates an inner persistence, and the powers of your thoughts and consciousness start to be used for education and for learning. And remember, a thought really is goal-oriented. So thoughts are good, but something that can happen sometimes when we're lost in thought is that's when the subconscious programming can take over sometimes. Like, you're driving your car and suddenly you're thinking about something. So the subconscious has to take over you driving the car so you don't go off the road. And then the subconscious can start to dominate your thinking too. And that's when your thoughts tend to drift. And Billy says, do not allow yourself to drift on the ocean of life, but hold firm to that steering wheel of your boat, steer your ship. And do not allow these unvalues to come up in your consciousness. But again, these unvalues, they can take months or years to completely reprogram. And these unvalues are talked about in Figu Bulletin 68. The characteristic of psychopaths: lack of logical decisions, lack of rational conduct, frequent change of sexual partner, boredom, parasitism. And who would know that boredom is actually a psychopathic behavior? And we have that as kids. And maybe that's sometimes when we get in trouble, we start bad behavior because we're bored. We can also start manipulative behavior. We can start to try to seduce other beings. And we also get focused on the sense of unfairness. And that's where many people in politics are. They're saying about the unfairness of the, various kinds of discrimination. Also, the value of psychopath can be a hate mentality. You see people that are filled with hate and they endorse torture. They have no remorse. They have no deep-reaching thoughts and feelings. They have no empathy. And I always say, compassion, empathy, moral reasoning are three of the first things to go. Always check yourself. I'm compassionate, I have empathy, and I have moral reasoning, because you won't murder or manslaughter anyone if you have compassion, empathy, and moral reasoning. You probably won't kill anything or hurt anything under those kind of conditions. But I want to speak briefly, and then I'll pull Solon in and Stephen if he's able to communicate today shortly. But I just want to cover a few more concepts. There's no room for rationality when you're in this mental state. And there's no virtue in these tangled, irrational, basically wrong ideational thoughts, because only irrationality and virtuelessness govern your thinking in a highly emotional form. And you're not really able to set true life determinations. You can go try to rob a bank, you can do all sorts of things, but not a life determination. Because virtuelessness is controlling your thoughts. And this negative state of mind, this low moral standards are in control. See, virtue is high moral standards. And have you noticed how people now are making references to performing violence against those who have another point of view? And I think there was an article recently in the Washington Examiner which says that the violent left is a serious problem. The New York Post recently had an article saying, will the Democrats condemn the left's growing violence? However, I think it's the tangled ideas, which can happen to both people on the left and right. You see, there's no room for rationality when people are in this state of mind. And room means a space that can be occupied, where something can be done. And I want to just read a couple sections from one of Billy's articles. And this is where I can maybe pull Solon in and start to have a conversation on this. If life is viewed, and this comes from an article called A Little Bit of Knowledge, Sense, and Wisdom, and it's up on the Future of Mankind site, and also Figu, Colorado has also really a great PDF with this in it too. It says, if life is viewed and considered in all its situations and variations, then it can be recognized that life means a constant struggle, a continuous careful study of one's own innermost self and outer self. The innermost self, which exists in the deepest consciousness, reflects the values of the creational spirit. But in opposition to that, the human being forms the outer self, the outer personality, according to his or her own views and understanding, by means of his or her thoughts and feelings and will. And as a rule, the outer self, this outer personality, which is also released outwardly in the environment, as one's own conduct completely contradicts the innermost self, which has a creationally given nature. And there is a constant argument between these two forms of self. And other factors continually attempt to interfere. There's an overlaying and a superficial fight again and again and again, and misguidingly shove themselves above the current occurrences of the self-struggle. However, the innermost self nonetheless incessantly struggles through again and again and again and again. And it always drowns out and covers up the outer self. So the good part is that the spiritual consciousness always continues to struggle forward again. And this is, striving is the very nature of the human being. So your innermost self, even I think this is why people live a life of total misery, or they become addicted, or they end up killing themselves, because they do it because the outer self refuses to allow the inner self to control. So maybe I'll pull Solon in here. Solon, you have a comment on any of this?
Yeah, I had a comment on a lot of things. So,
I figured you would.
Yeah. So, I think I talked on here about assumptions.
Yeah.
And when one person makes assumptions and they don't understand the entire thing, but sticks to this assumption, it causes a lot of problems. And this is definitely one of those battles that we struggle with, which is talked about here. Where you have the inner, the innermost self, which exists in the deepest consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I like how he says it infects outwardly the environment. We know that when, for instance, when we go somewhere, we perceive the environment, and we sometimes will get a bad feeling and whatnot. And you have to wonder if this is because of the people there and what they're placing on it. You know what I mean?
Are there thoughts, maybe?
Yeah, like for instance, when you go, I'll use this example. There used to be a pristine ocean. I guess it was more of we'll just call it a bay in Japan. And people came in there and they started littering it to the point now when you see it, it makes you feel awful, like polluted. Like, why would anyone want to go there? But when you saw the picture beforehand, it was this pristine environment. So it was like this carelessness with all these partying and this not caring, just, almost like this self-loathing and paradise, and people kind of polluted it. Whereas before, there was none of this. It was clean.
This is kind of symbolic of the whole earth right now, because really the earth has the potential to be a paradise, but we've all polluted it so badly, particularly with the plastics, that it's terrible.
Yeah, and that's another thing. People think that they can just throw something out the window and that it doesn't affect them. And in reality, we know these break down into microplastics, and you end up eating them, and you have all kinds of problems from it.
Oh, you mean like it gets into the soil and the water?
Yeah, so me and a friend actually did a translation of this from Contact 603, and it talks about that. Literally, what's going on is that these plastics break down into microplastics, and then the fish eat it, and then it makes its way up through the food line, which we eventually eat. So we're literally digesting microplastics, and it causes all kinds of lung problems, and just all these issues.
I bet it.
I don't have it in front of me. So.
I bet it affects the digestive system too.
Yep, that's for sure. And we know that a lot of these plastics are made from estrogen, so they also affect men, and I'm sure as well as women.
Wow.
So
please, if you can remember, bring this up in the last hour. I'd like to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about it now too, but I'd like to hear Frosty go on a tirade about that.
Sure he will. Yeah. But we also know from epigenetics that our inner environment is also controlled by our thoughts, which a lot of people are aware of today about as well as anxiety. And we have these things called like mindful meditation that a lot of people who have bad depression or anxiety, where they'll become more mindful of themselves, which typically is just clearing the mind.
Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about this a lot. He says our thoughts affect our blood chemistry, and then our blood chemistry affects our health.
Yeah. Yes, and also adrenaline. Whenever you get extremely into an emotional state, you release adrenaline through the blood, which actually causes things to constrict and a lot of issues if you stay in on adrenaline.
I wonder if we're in that adrenaline state for a prolonged time, that it has a weakening effect on us too. I don't think we're designed to stay in that state for days and days. No, I don't think so either. Did you read page 224 already? Is that what you're going over now? I was kind of confused. Well, we probably have a different edition. I thought about that after I had talked to you. Yeah. The very beginning of 224 to me says, therefore it is necessary to search for the source of the life power and develop the power.
No, mine sound completely different. Oh, man. Okay.
See, there's two editions of this.
I did not know this. All right.
Yeah. So you probably studied something equally as interesting.
I was actually going to quote Nicole Tesla because I think he did a really great job.
See, mine is the second edition from 2014. Yours might be newer or older, or I don't know.
I think mine's like right when it came out. I bought the book, so I'm sure it's probably the first edition. So I did not know there was two editions.
Yeah, I've had this problem before, definitely.
Okay, well, now knowledge is power, right? So now I know that there's two editions, so I know to make sure that I'm on the same line.
But what was your page 20 or 224 talking about?
Well, mine actually talked more about kind of what you were saying. It talks more about what the psyche is labeled as wish dreams. As we have these ideas, they eventually come into reality. And certain people don't ever actually have any of these dreams, and we live through other people. Now, this is my interpretation of it, so of course, it's always best for everyone to read it for themselves.
Right.
And so eventually, and that's kind of what goes on with the media when you hear about the left and the right. So, for instance, I live in the South. People are automatically assuming that I'm like this massive Donald Trump person. I got this big truck and guns. And the weird part is, like, none of that fits for me. So, that's a massive assumption.
Yes.
And however, these people put these ideas in their heads, and we're battling one another over things that aren't actually happening.
Yeah, it's so true.
But Nicole Tesla actually said this, which kind of relates. He says, "I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by the inventor as he sees some creation of the brain unfolding to success. Such emotions make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, and everything."
So it's the creational impulses.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd say it's more than that. Like, for instance, I was just talking about this. We use the word creation, and if you break it down into a verb, it is to create. And that's literally what we are as human beings. Every time we think, we are literally creating. And by doing this, you're creating this thing inside you. It's every thought.
That's very important. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, so when you talk about that people should steer this, they absolutely should. It has an effect on even your DNA. You get so upset about something that you start to shake. That's not healthy.
Like I talk about in the morning, waking up and being grumpy or whatever. Mm-hmm. But also, and this is why I had to learn all those different phrases. I memorized a lot of this book, Mind of Thoughts, because I even notice I just have this feeling of dread coming over me. And that's when I start to tell myself I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic. Because these waves of emotion, like they can just, and if you allow yourself to be influenced by these negative thoughts and feelings, they will bring bad reality into your life. There's no question.
Well, it is said that when we have thoughts, we then have feelings, which then they repeat themselves over and over again, this perpetual motion. So it's almost up to us to like you said, steer this. We are in control of these, and it's happening through our thoughts. So when they arise, we don't have to continuously keep thinking about them. We can pause, and we can either, do maybe, like they said, the mindfulness, or you can put your attention on to something else. That's all consciousness is your awareness.
Yes. And the wish dream.
Oh, yes. Yes, I think everyone should have a wish dream. Of course, I think it's important that we do the 3 golden rules, the look each other in the eyes, smile, and always keep your head up. Because how are you going to be able to see anything if you're not looking up?
I had a great study this week on performing our duty to ourselves and the importance of, being our own best friend. And you did little things like grooming and that kind of thing is so important. Just fulfilling our duty to ourselves. Even when we're alone at home, no one's around, take the time to clean yourself up, to also not to don't put yourself down. Don't think. Always think of yourself as just as creative, just as knowledgeable as anyone. I really like that whole idea. The notion of fulfilling our duty to ourselves, and I don't do a good enough job of that. But I'll just read a couple things here on page 34. It says, "If the human being does not continually pay attention to himself and herself, and does not fulfill his duty to himself or herself and his or her own duty, then she or he declines and ends in misery, whereby even suicidal thoughts are not infrequent, which in many cases also come to realization. Therefore, the fulfillment of one's duty to oneself and one's own duty are also anchored in this value and in this thinking, that one's own psyche shall be kept healthy and blithe, so that it cannot succumb to any kind of attack. But the psyche can only be harmed through the feelings and the thoughts of an unreal nature, thus through imaginations which are called forth through anxiety, suffering, grief, and worry, and so forth." And that's what I was talking about. Just these weird feelings that just kind of darkness that just can come over you sometimes. Now, you studied this book, The Way to Live, a lot too, right?
Yeah, I have not completed it, but yes, sir. Yes.
Is there a group in North Carolina now that's meeting?
Yeah, it's not an official thing. We have a little small North Carolina group. Yeah, we mainly read the Goblet.
The Goblet of Truth.
Thank you, Goblet of Truth. Yeah, I was about to say Kelsey Barhite.
I think that's a hard read. I'm sorry.
It's a lot like the Om. Like, you read one thing and you can have a massive discussion about it. And when you do these things, I really feel like they stick with inside you because you understand it better.
Oh, that's interesting. So what kind of things are you studying in the Goblet of Truth now?
Well, I'll tell you this. The last thing we read, and to be honest with you, we're actually reading the last chapters, one that Billy wrote. So we probably going to have to go back eventually and read it. But the last thing, it actually talks about never even allowing a negative thought in terms of an evil one to ever even arise in your mind. And I started to think about that, and I was like, that is kind of when we start getting off track, is when we start to think that way. And if we just never even allow those to take place within us, then we will remain calm.
So that's interesting. So there's a way to stop a negative thought before it even...
Yes. For instance, like when we start talking about the Civil War, we can talk about it in a way where it's just what's happening instead of being like, oh yeah, the women are going to start fighting the men, and then we're kind of creating something that hasn't taken place yet. But if we look here and we say the government is arguing with one another, and that's reality. So it's not necessarily that we're creating something, but we can talk about the effects from this. But if we start making assumptions like Donald Trump's going to kill all of us if we don't start listening to him or something like that, then we're getting a little out of control. So you must stick with reality and the cause and effects, of course, which is logic.
That's very, very interesting. There's a paragraph that I have the hardest time finding in the Goblet of Truth. It's called What the Truth Knows to Say. Have you ever heard that one?
No, I've heard you talk about it. I have not heard it. No.
It says, it goes something like this. It says, rivers, stones, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms are on a journey through time which involve many, many lifetimes. And death is just the passage into the world of pure spirit. And many of these creatures are aware of one another, and they're connected by these psychic swinging waves, I think it's translated as. And I just love that whole verse there. I can just, it's so vivid in my mind. I can see this, and that's one of the passages of. Do you have a favorite in the Goblet of Truth? Like a favorite?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I was not prepared to have a favorite. I find the whole thing to be very, very important to understand, not just to read, but to understand. If it takes you years to understand certain chapters, I feel like you learn more than it would be to read the entire thing and yet not understand any of it.
Marianne Eulinger, I asked her what was her favorite Meier writing, and she said the Goblet of Truth. I think that's important because I think she has real insight.
Well, it is important. I'm kind of a fan of the Geistesslayer, but that's only me. I don't even know.
Now, the Geistesslayer is a book of the quote-unquote spiritual teachings, right?
Well, it's not. It's lessons. It's not really a book. It's like lessons, and it's like 32-year course or something ridiculous like that.
Now, that's extremely interesting. And you cannot get a hold of that unless you're like a passive member or something?
Yeah, you have to be a passive member, or apparently you can also donate, and then you can get you can get the Geistesslayer that way. Okay,
and the Geistesslayer is German. It's written in German, right?
Oh yeah, there's no way that'll ever be translated. It's not possible.
When I was looking at the passages on page 224 that we were talking about in my version, my edition, that is extremely complicated German. And I looked up all these German words today and put them in my notes, but of course you didn't. Yeah, you didn't look up the same ones.
I wish next time you give me a page, I'm going to need you to tell me what it starts with. So I want to be on the same level,
Yeah. I don't know if we'll have to go backwards or forwards, but the Geistesslayer is if you're a passive member. So if I'm ever going to do that, I don't know. Marianne isn't even a passive member, I don't think.
I thought she was.
No.
She don't.
Nope.
Okay,
she's always, that's basically what our conversation has been, just all email back and forth. Now, that was my understanding. Maybe she is I know she's not a member. Maybe she's a passive member, but, she's right there with Billy all the time, so.
Oh, is she?
Oh, yeah.
So she's in the center, but she's not a member? I'm good.
Yeah. Now, the guy... Now, you would probably know this better than me. There's Christian, but isn't there like another guy that... I don't know what term I want to use.
I wish I knew about the Mother Center, and I really don't. I need to make a trip up there so I can meet those people and have the German conversation.
You're like me, you haven't gone.
No, I haven't. I'm trying to pay off my house and my debts. I find that's more important right now.
Well, the way things are going in this country, I don't know if we're going to be able to get out of the country and into the country. I think we're really coming to the point where we're entering the phase that's talked about in the Enoch prophecies, where all of these horrific things they're just a threat away. At least that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting, Mark? So, I guess they would call me a millennial. I'm like on the early end of it, so I don't necessarily see myself that way. However, I feel like we're the biggest experiment that has ever come into existence, because we are now on technology, and it's like we're getting to the point where people can publish things and say whatever theories they want. They have the ability to speak, but not a lot of people are using factual information like we have with scientists. And so we've kind of come up to a point where doing your own research and understanding a person is so important, that I feel like that these issues are only going to get worse, because we are, I talk about this a lot, these assumptions we make. We don't understand the whole of everything. And I feel like because of that, we are trying to put everything in categories instead of really trying to understand the bottom line of things, you know? And
now, when you say put things in categories, do you mean generalize?
Yes, like the right and left.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and you know what's weird is that I think there's actually a term for like neutral. I was talking to someone about it, and that's where she said she falls. But when I go to talk to her about right and left things, it's like she doesn't even know where they fall. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, you know, you have a lot of people who don't see overpopulation as a problem, and yet they've never done any research. And then you go to present that with them, and sometimes they think that you're trying to say, you know, by saying we need to reduce the population, they think I'm trying to talk about killing people, when in reality I'm talking about birth stops, because people are going to naturally die.
Right.
And so, you know, go ahead.
Sorry. No, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I also feel like, I feel like that's what's happening nowadays. It's like, you know, because technology has come into existence, we don't understand the implications that they are going to have on us. And we make a lot of assumptions. Like, a lot of people don't think video games are that harmful, yet I know good well when I play them, I'm shaking sometimes because I'm about to lose or whatever, and yet they are having an effect on me, you know?
Literally, if you're shaking, that's affected your whole nervous system.
Yeah, I actually was talking about that with someone today. He was telling me he was playing a game, and it got so intense he was shaking. I was like, man, that's not very good.
You traumatized. You actually traumatized your nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, it causes all kinds of problems. And yet, I mean, that's just one thing. I mean, not everyone plays games, you know. Do you remember the time when there was not allowed to be gunshots or anything like that on television?
No, I don't remember that.
Well, I'll just say this. I remember when MTV, with the very controversial Slim Shady thing came on, like Forgot About Drake. At the end, you hear a gun go off. And that was very controversial at the time. Like, they were not going to allow that. And now I'm seeing like commercials that are showing, you know, violence. And I'm starting to see, you know, to the point where cuss words are now okay to say. And and you have things like memes that are like, you know, you have what we call trolling now. It's like you can make a joke and just say you're trolling, and it's supposed to have no consequences to it. And there's just a lot of things that we're doing that are unhealthy.
Yes. There's a lot of, I don't know why people want to be so nasty. And there's a lot of also what I would call hypersensitivity that, you know, people will say, I'll give you a perfect example. And you know, beware of Facebook, let me just say that. But I did post some things to this past week. And I wanted to bring this up during the show, and I never put it in my notes. But I saw this strange news thing from Bing.com, Do you ever use Bing?
No.
Bing. Okay, it's from Microsoft, and wow, it's amazing. And I see this. Oh, you know how I was talking about Project Mockingbird by the CIA at the beginning of the hour, and how this was a large-scale thing that CIA did to propagandize the people in the United States. Well, I saw this article, and I'm like reading this and going, you know how you have this little bit of discernment in the back of your mind that says, this isn't right, this can't be, this isn't completely true. Anyway, they say white supremacist kills black man in some city, I don't know what it was, Baltimore or something, and I'm like, well, this is weird, you know. And then I read the article, and this guy supposedly drove several hundred miles from another city to this other city, and then he walked down this black man, and he had a sword, this white supremacist did, and he kills this black guy. And then, and I'm like, and then I don't know if they were getting ready to prosecute the white supremacists. I'm thinking to myself, this just sounds like bogus. This sounds totally bogus to me. I mean, it just doesn't even sound real, you know. So anyway, I posted something like that on Facebook of, this whole story of this white supremacist killing this old black guy. And someone got triggered and said I was so racist by saying the word old black guy. Like that was derogatory. I would have said old white guy. I consider myself an old white guy. How could you interpret everything as racist today? What is going on? And this is this propaganda, and we're being programmed mentally. And I feel that people are victims of this. And I would argue that you and I and Stephen and other people that have found the Meier material are probably independent thinkers. And I think other people are just completely vulnerable. And they don't have that ability for independent thought. Like it, for some reason, is ingrained in us from a childhood level to, I'm going to figure that out myself. I'm going to make it my own decision on it. See, my father was that way. He was just absolutely, he would have his own opinions. And maybe I saw that, and subconsciously, that's how I came out as well. But I think on the other hand, other people don't have that ability. Like, for example, for you, you're from North Carolina, but you don't have a monster truck and a shotgun. What?
Nope. I have a Prius, actually. It's like the opposite.
Do you really? I have a Prius too. Yeah. We both have Priuses. Okay. Well,
Prius Nation. I'm just joking.
Yeah, we didn't plan this. We didn't consult each other. No, it's bad though when you're going up and down them hills sometimes, I bet. In the snow, right? It's probably
I don't have that problem here. There's not been enough snow, so I think
you're not getting a lot of snow. I have a big driveway that's very high, and I have to pay like a fair amount of money to, I'm glad I got someone that can at least, plow it for me, because I get stranded. I can't get out or in. My wife's car goes in and out just great, but the little Prius doesn't. But anyway, what I'm talking.
Can I comment?
Do what?
Can I comment on what you just said?
Sure, please.
So Billy actually wrote a lot of articles about the USA, and there is some things we don't understand about the DNA. However, we do seem to inherit our parents' thoughts. So if your parents are religious, when you come out, you will have some of these religious thoughts. So if a person is a racist, they could also have racist thoughts. But these don't mean that's who you are. You can change these within yourself.
It's really interesting you say that, because my grandparents on both sides were truly religious, but my parents weren't. They were kind of neutral. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a very good thing, because I went the religious route for a while, but obviously I snapped out of that. But, you bring up some really interesting points there. And I feel very grateful that I grew up in a neutral environment like that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great. But I just think that, that's like another thing. It's like, we're passing these degenerate things down and we're not trying to improve on ourselves. And because of that, I feel like we're getting even further in the wrong direction.
Well, one thing that I think I got from my father that was bad, that I'm aware of, and it's something that I've worked on now for years and years, is a bad temper.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have anger, it affects your liver, and it makes it so much more likely that you'll die of liver cancer. And my father, when he eventually did die, the doctor said, like the whole inside was cancer, and it was, probably from the liver starting out, because he was a very loving, wonderful person, but also had big problems with anger, and he had ulcers and things like that. So I'm so glad that I found the Meier material, I found the Meier thoughts, and I'm able to now start programming the subconscious, because when we're not actively steering, we fall back to the subconscious, and the subconscious has all your programs,
Mm-hmm.
you're whatever you're programmed for is going to come out from your subconscious. And we spend a lot of time just thinking, and when you're just thinking, be careful, because the subconscious thing can roll forward, and it starts to take care of, like driving the car, and it takes care of whatever you're doing at the time, and then suddenly a thought will come into your mind, and you're like, well, where did that thought come from? Well, it's part of this giant morass of all these tangled ideas and thoughts that are in your subconscious. Some of which you place there themselves, and some of which come from your parents, and some come from society. So you have to, and I think I'm getting better and better all the time at recognizing, there's one of those thoughts that I have to, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
There's one of them bad thoughts I gotta.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
Well, I want to comment so bad. I want to talk about your father real quick. So he had the liver problem. Well, that goes back to what I was saying. When you get so upset, you release adrenaline. And one of the things that it eventually goes to is the liver, to clean all that out. So you're literally constantly putting this in there, and it's like a toxin.
Wow. Yeah. Your thoughts are so important. Your thoughts.
Yeah, man.
And I my thing I'm trying, and I wish, the one thing I think I've done successfully is I've learned to get back into this neutral positive state. Was that the music I just heard? Or am I hearing things?
Yeah, he said it started.
Okay. All right, we're on break. We'll be back in 5 minutes, folks. And maybe I'll play a little music so something will go into our there we go. I can hear the music kind of trying to come on and off. So, but I'll turn on, I think this will also be heard. I'll just go to the studio. Here we go. I'll be back. Was that the music I just heard? Or am I hearing?
Yeah, he said it started.
Okay. All right, we're on break. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
There we go. I can hear the music kind of trying to come on. So, but I'll turn on. I think this will also be heard. I'll just go to the studio. Here we go.
She travels to Earth through the rainbow crystal bubbles from the furthest reaches of space and time, across the dimensions, through the elements, and in harmony with the colors of the universe. Through her mastery of abstract stream of consciousness malapropisms, she weaves a web of comic, satiric, cosmic conversation. Her subjects can range from Norman, the the goose next door to astrology and earth changes and into the deep recesses of the soul matrix. She holds a wealth of knowledge on herbs, plants, and astrology. Join Mona and her guests on Adventures of a Feral Hippie as she touches the earthly radio waves 5 days a week at 2 p.m. Monday to Friday on Studio B at Revolution Radio.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, Frosty, welcome to the show. We're on break. Sit tight.
Great host, Lorian Fenton.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Awesome, man. We got lots to talk about. Hang tough.
Stories from the past, the present, along with all of our guests' secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Hey, Frosty, welcome to the show. We're on break. Sit tight.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Awesome, man. We got lots to talk about. Hang tough.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Are you curious about the origins of the human race? Join me, Gavin McCall, and a variety of guests on Ancient Humans, where we decipher world events, explore scientific theories, personal stories, myths, mysteries, and lore about the history of the human race.
Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fed, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, misdirection, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendicare, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendedbite.com. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone. I want to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics, to the second hour. And I've got Frosty Wooldridge on the line, and I'm going to start out talking about what I started the show with, really, was Operation Mockingbird, which was a large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, which began back in the 50s. And it was an attempt to manipulate the news media for propaganda purposes. And we've had a whole bunch of crazy stuff happen this week, Frosty, and I don't know if you heard about the arrest of Roger Stone yet. Are you?
Yes, I did.
Now, Roger has been on this program before. I had a great conversation with him. I bought his book called Clinton's War on Women. I actually bought the audio version, too. And I think the guy's a patriot, personally. I mean, you may have a different opinion, but do you think it's necessary that the FBI, sends a SWAT team to his house at 4 a.m. with like 27 armed guards or something like that? What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Very interesting to see what's going on. I want every listener to appreciate this. I've watched the United States and certainly the United States government for the last 50 years now. Certainly I started to come of age in the Dwight D. Eisenhower era, and then started to watch the kind of government corruption that brought us Vietnam, certainly brought us Desert Storm, and then really brought us Iraq, and all of the thousands, tens of thousands of kids that have been killed in those wars. If I knew more about the Korean War, I'd say the Korean War was pretty much the same as the Vietnam War, and the same thing with the 18-year Iraq-Afghanistan war. These are bankers' wars, and the corruption that goes on, and the profit incentive that's driving them, and the military-industrial complex that makes this thing move, really is extraordinarily frustrating. So when you got, and then if anybody has read J. Edgar Hoover, here's a man that was in charge of the law, and he was himself very, very corrupt on many different levels. And so when you see what's going on right now, whether it's Mueller trying to indict or create some kind of a crime to indict or bring to justice a man like Donald Trump, and then arresting many other individuals, it's more than a little frustrating, because since 1968, I have really never trusted the U.S. government, because it's run by a bunch of people who are inherently corrupt themselves. And so we, the American people, are not ever being told the truth. If you really want to get to the truth of, say, J. Edgar Hoover, or certainly the Vietnam War, David Halberstam wrote a book, The Best and the Brightest. And that book right there will give you an understanding of exactly what kind of corruption drove us into Vietnam, and why it continued for 10 years, and why these kids my age at that time were killed and maimed, 350,000 of them. Also, of course, Daniel Ellsberg really exploded and exposed the corruption and the hubris, if you will, with the Pentagon Papers. And so now you have this, Stone just got arrested. It's like, what's he going to do? He's not a bank robber, and he certainly isn't an underground thug. He's just a man that's been involved in the government here over the years. And so you send 29 FBI agents out to arrest him in the middle of the night. It goes to show you the drama that's going on in Washington, D.C., and then you see, and this is just from my perspective, again, as a historical observer, they're going to try to impeach Donald Trump, except they're not going to impeach him. They're going to impeach him, but they're not going to convict him, because the Republicans, and it's all partisan, own the Senate. So it's a waste of our time, and it's a waste of money, and it's a waste of everything else. And yet we got to sit here and watch the shutdown that's gone, finally is going to be off for at least 3 weeks. But what is frustrating, I've called both my senators and House member, and just twice in the last 2 weeks, and I said, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. I pay you $193,000 a year, and you didn't get out in front of this. You didn't solve this. You've been in office for over 10 years, and my two senators and House member, and they didn't pass E-Verify. So it goes to show you, none of these elected officials really wants to solve anything. They just want to continue with really some kind of a facade. So I'm sure everybody's listening today is probably nodding your head going, yep, that's pretty much what's going on. And yet somehow, over the years, we simply don't, or we haven't elected term limits. We need to have term limits to get people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and John McCain, who passed away finally, Orrin Hatch, Dianne Feinstein, all these people that have been in government and senators or House members for Maxine Waters, completely useless, Sheila Jackson, useless, John Lewis out of Georgia, useless, Hank Johnson these are all fossils. They have nothing to offer America, and that's why term limits need to be put in place, but then they won't vote term limits because they want to be forever politicians. And that's the kinds of things we're facing. Did I kind of sum it up a little bit on that, Mark?
Oh, I love that. Let's go back to Desert Storm. Boy, you really covered a lot of interesting material. If you think of the destruction of these massive Iraqi forces, I think of the A-10 tank killers and the F-16s and the F-15E Strike Eagle, particularly on the road back to Basra. When they wiped out thousands of Iraqi vehicles. It was almost like it was a test. They just wanted to test out their new military toys or something. Because didn't they tell Saddam that he could actually go into Kuwait? I heard that. I don't know if that's true.
That's correct. They literally invited him to do that. They weren't going to bother him. They weren't going to do anything. And you're exactly right. War allows the testing of all of these new weapons systems, and that's how you get all these advancements and the ways to kill human beings and destroy materiel and destroy airplanes and destroy logistics, dumps and all that goes with that. And in my own experience in the military as an officer, I can tell you, the military loves war. And you sit there, and you. I remember I read Patton. Patton was so disappointed, that World War II was over. He didn't really get to a lot of action, so he just kind of twiddled his thumbs, and he was waiting for World War II. Well, that's the military people up there. They can't wait to become a captain. They can't wait to become a major. They can't wait to become a light colonel. They can't wait to become a colonel, and then on to general. And the only thing that drives that essentially is war. And so that's the tragedy of that. And most Americans sit here, and we just spent $6 trillion for the last 18 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's costing over $40 billion a year. $40 billion a year. It used to be $12 billion a month. And now things are kind of slowing down, but it's still 40-something billion a year, and we're $6 trillion. It's just incomprehensible why somebody would do that when our own country, our own citizens need so much more nation building, jobs building, educational systems building, infrastructure building. I mean, I could just go down the line here. And yet, those people in those high offices and all that power, they're the ones that own all of these 535 congressional critters. And we, the American people, are we're collateral damage on so many different levels.
It's so interesting when you were talking about World War II and you brought up Patton. And what it made me think of is, I don't know, do you remember the M4 Sherman tank? It was a medium tank. It had a very mediocre gun. They couldn't kill the Tiger tanks. They couldn't even get a shot off, usually. And I think we built some unbelievable number, like 20,000 of these tanks. So we sacrificed, I don't know how many thousands of people. I mean, the Tiger tanks, the only reason we finally won is we just kind of overran them. But we lost so many people. And I've seen documentaries on guys that were, their job was to go in and clean up the M4 Shermans. So sometimes, the crew would get killed. Like one of those 88s that the Tigers would shoot would just pierce the hull of the M4 Sherman. It would blow up inside the tank. and it didn't actually completely destroy the tank. So these guys would have to go in the tank and pull out the body parts and clean everything up, and they would just like patch up the hole in the Sherman tank, get another crew, and send them back into battle. I mean, it's insanity what we do in war. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, well, for those of you who would like to see really make you sick to your stomach, just see the movie Full Metal Jacket. That Full Metal Jacket,
that's a good
really
movie.
brings it home. Yeah, it's a movie that takes you. I mean, I went right through boot camp, just like that guy that shot, blew his head off right there on the toilet.
Right.
In the movie itself, and that drill sergeant played a heck of a drill sergeant. He was a mean, vindictive, dedicated, sadistic, completely all military drill sergeant, and I'm convinced. And I did my boot camp at Fort Benning and also Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Benning, Georgia. And, my drill sergeant was a guy named Pierce, Sergeant Pierce. They're all a bunch of sadists. They want to make you as miserable as they can. And then it's supposedly they call you maggot and slime ball and scumbag. And I mean, you are just lower than an earthworm. And they do everything they can to just dismantle your sense of respect, self-respect, sense of integrity, sense of anything. And all they are there for is to show you and teach you how to kill. You literally become a bloody, murdering maniac in the United States Marine Corps and certainly in the United States Army. It's in the Air Force. It's a whole lot different because you get to murder everybody by dropping bombs out of planes. And certainly in the Navy, it's less direct. You shoot from the deck, or you arm the planes that go and bomb everybody and have them kill them. During the Vietnam War, we killed 2.3 million Vietnamese.
My goodness.
2.3 million.
Wow.
People died. Then we ran them over with Agent Orange that just caused unbelievable havoc in their environment. Birth defects, and you name it, still going on today. Thank you, Monsanto, with Agent Orange, which is now still being distributed throughout the USA in things like Roundup and Weed Be Gone and all the other herbicides and pesticides and so forth that they put out. So, yeah, it's almost like here we have the greatest nation on earth, but you have such corruption going on. And when you start finding out about the real things and the reasons for it, and the fact that the Iraq War and the Afghanistan wars have continued for 18 years and accomplished absolutely nothing, and guys like me got to see it from the inside out, and now looking from the outside and seeing history, it really is, you wonder, what is it about the American government and why we're doing this and why the American people are even putting up with it, and so placidly, if you will, paying for it. It's extraordinarily exasperating for somebody like me who knows a lot about it.
Yeah, I want to correct myself. I did a little quick search, and there were actually 49,324 Sherman tanks built in World War II. And I remember there were Tiger tanks, commanders of Tiger tanks that had killed like over 300 Sherman tanks just by their tank. So, we just consider our own people just sacrificable, just, put them in an inferior tank, but we're going to build 49,000 of them, and eventually they're going to win, right? But it's just crazy thoughts, isn't it?
Well, that's right. The only reason we won World War II was because we just had overwhelming numbers. We had overwhelming numbers, and the Germans just didn't have. You have to all understand, Germany is a very tiny country. It's not even the size of Ohio, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
And so you have all the German people, and you've got a nutbag like Hitler, and then you got all of these Gestapo. They're all a bunch of really sick people. Their whole thing is to completely destroy anybody and anyone who opposes them. And whether, and then you got Stalin right after that in Russia. And, you had Lenin, then you had Stalin, then you had Khrushchev. The real sad reality is there's always these, Mussolini, he killed 11 million people.
Really?
Stalin killed something like 24 million. Then you get Mao Zedong over in China. I don't know what the numbers, but it was into the over tens of millions in China over the some kind of a, what they call it, it was a nice name, some kind of artful revolution there in China. So the March of Humanity has really been a nasty, bloody, godforsaken mess, and it's still going on. And there are actually still people that like war, that they can't wait to press war in, and the rest of us are essentially the collateral damage. And to this day, I'm so thankful that I lived through the Vietnam War and lived through my Army experience, and that's why I've really been thankful every day of my life for my life. And but there's 58,000 kids that did not get to have their lives. Mm-hmm. And certainly another 350,000 that had lost an arm, a leg, lost an eye, lost their mind in the Vietnam War. And look at all the ones right now. I think there's more suicides right now. There's been more suicides from the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps than there has been deaths over there in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there's been about, it's almost 5,000 deaths, about 4,000 in Iraq and then 1,000 in Afghanistan, I think. And there's been more suicides than that. I mean, something like 20 a day or 22 a day. It's just unbelievable. And I can tell you why. In the military, you really lose your mind, and your circuits get rewired. And combat is a freaking nightmare. And how anybody recovers from it and becomes a normal person is beyond me, because I still get in heated situations sometimes if I start talking with another Army guy from the Vietnam War era, because we're all in our 70s now, essentially.
Do you have post-traumatic stress at all?
Well, as a medical officer, I didn't get into the combat. I mean, I did the combat in Fort Benning, and I did the combat training, and it was scary as hell. I mean, scary. You just sit there and you realize you're just going to be killed over in Vietnam, because there's no heroes in war. It's just there's a bullet on your name on it. There's a bullet with your name on it. If you don't have a bullet on your name on it, then you're going to make it through. But it's just luck of the draw. There are no heroes in war. I mean, some of them live like Audie Murphy, and then you might, but and the John Waynes, that's a myth of just, it's more bull crap than you can imagine. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, John Wayne, he was a real man. No, he was an actor, and there was never a bullet, shot at him ever in any movie. He didn't face any danger whatsoever. And so, it's very frustrating. And we say, well, he saved a bunch of guys. He jumped on a landmine. No, he just died, and somebody else lived. And they gave, you get a Purple Heart, and you get your kids and your wife get a funeral. Like I say, it's just unbelievable that there are people up there in Washington, D.C. that float the Afghanistan-Iraq wars for 18 years, and they have accomplished absolutely nothing.
You talked about J. Edgar Hoover. Mm-hmm. I had heard stories that he was a cross-dresser, or was he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. He had all sorts of a sexual intrigue.
Oh, did he?
Again, just get a book and read the biography of J. Edgar Hoover. And this guy was a little bit strange.
Yeah. Now, also, Jerome Corsi has been under investigation as well. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. And I've talked to Jerome Corsi. I've been on radio shows with him, and he's a very good investigative journalist. One of the things, if you get too close to the truth, even in a constitutional republic where there is a deep state, where there is a military-industrial complex, where there are people who are undermining the rule of law, and you get too close, you get too hot, you're going to get taken down. And that's what's happened to Jerome Corsi. And so I don't know what's going to end up with that, but he is one heck of an investigative journalist. And again, there are, if you look at who was that guy that's over in Russia now? He was an Air Force guy, and he exposed all of the things going on. Then you got the other guy, Assange.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got those two guys. That one guy that's over there from WikiLeaks in Russia, what is his name?
I forget, actually.
Okay, well, more than likely, both those men are literally the whistleblowers. of what's really going on in the United States government and the underhanded lying, cheating, thieving, stealing, intrigue that's continuing. I mean, when you look back on the Vietnam War, I mean, just the unbelievable lies fed to the American public day after day, year after year for 10 years and got all these kids killed. And it was all on lies, all based on lies. And there was no need to be in Vietnam. There was never any need to be in Korea. Thomas Jefferson said the best thing we can do is stay out of other people's intrigues, other countries' intrigues. Nothing we can do in Africa is going to do anything to change the way Africa operates. The same thing in India or Pakistan or certainly in China, Mexico, all those other places. Their intrigues will go on with or without us. Why are we committed? Why are we in there? There is absolutely no reason and there's no fruition whatsoever. And yet, American people just sit back and watch it happen. And of course, now that we have a volunteer army, military, then there's no question. It's just a volunteer force, and there's no questions about it. And everybody serves. And whereas in my time, we're sitting there going, we don't want to die over there in Vietnam. We're going to march in the streets. And we did. I personally did. I mean, even when I was in ROTC, I was marching for peace in Chicago and Washington and Detroit, Lansing, Michigan. I went to several other peace marches because I didn't want to die over in Vietnam, because I had friends of mine that were over there telling me what a bunch of baloney it was.
To shift gears just a little bit here, have you heard of this U.S. representative? Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes, I actually have. I might even do a story on her. She is a young lady around 28 or 29 years old who has no business being in the House of Representatives because she's totally unqualified.
Totally.
She thinks the three branches of government are, and I'm quoting, President, House, and Senate.
No kidding.
Unquote.
Oh my gosh. I heard her. Have you heard her economic plan where she wanted to devote $42 billion and people?
No, trillion.
Trillion. Yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you go.
She also wants to tax billionaires 70%.
Yeah.
She wants to redistribute income. She would like to see America become a socialist type of governance, so that we too could become another Venezuela. And so, but again, when you look at people like her, the people that voted her in, they vote for a living. They don't vote for anything like common sense, critical thinking, representative government. They're voting their emotions instead of realistically voting for a qualified individual. The same thing if you're looking at somebody like John Lewis from Georgia. He's been in for 40 years and he hasn't done a doggone thing, but he represents his African-American constituents, except that he doesn't do anything for them. The same thing with Hank Johnson, also a Democrat from Georgia. The same thing. He does nothing. He's the guy that in front of a subcommittee at the Congress, and it's on film, thought that the island of Guam would tip over if you had too many people on one side of it. You've got Maxine Waters, who literally has an IQ between a blade of grass and a toothpick. And she's in the House of Representatives. But you have the same thing with Sheila Jackson, that Hudson gal from Florida. There are a lot of really dumb people that get elected out of really dumb, districts that are populated by a lot of really dumb people, and that's a tragedy, because then you don't have any action. None of those have done anything for their constituents. Instead, they're just partying it up and they're making a lot of money and having a great time in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, there's some great flaws, and that's why term limits are just the most. In fact, Thomas Jefferson tried to install term limits, but he was outvoted. And so it just means that people in power like to stay in power. And as Lord Acton said, and I think it was Lord Acton of France, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what you've got. And that's why we have all these career corrupt politicians that just never go away until they die. essentially.
And so we have, on the one hand, tremendous corruption. We have the abuse of power with the Mueller investigation.
Yep.
We have people that are politicians that are so clearly not qualified to be there. We have the mainstream media, which is working with the CIA to basically mind control and propagandize the American people. And then a few people like us that are trying to wake up the world to overpopulation. So I'll give you your segue into your immigration overpopulation for tonight.
Okay, well, thank you. The one thing that every politician and all of the world, the leaders of the world, actually, and certainly all of the governors of all 50 states here in the nation, certainly in Canada the same, they run from the population issue. And, of course, the last taboo is to talk negatively against immigration. It's bad enough, because it's terrible that we don't take in all the illegal immigrants and we give them all a complete amnesty and all their children amnesty. But we continue to take in that 1.2 million every year legally, and it's like a sacred cow. And even though it's driving everybody's consequences, and I can say this, immigration-driven overpopulation here in the United States is the number one issue of the 21st century. And if we don't stop it, if we don't rescind the 1965 Immigration Reform Act, our kids are going to be in the middle of a massive load of another 140 million people by 2050, which is only 31 years from now, and a doubling from 330 million to 625 million before the end of the century, which is like 80 years from now, which is just the lifetime of a child born today. But in that interim, you're going to see massive consequences as to water shortages, energy crisis that will become unsolvable and irreversible, and of course the resource crisis, which will also become unsolvable and irreversible, because again, exponential growth cannot be sustained ever. You can't sustain it. It mimics a cancer cell. And in my forthcoming book, America's overpopulation predicament, blindsiding future generations, the one that we're talking about today is the plastic onslaught.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Solon, are you still there? Did he leave? He had the most interesting thing that he brought up. Oh, he had to. No, he's there. Solon.
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry.
Talk about bring up the whole thing about the plastics again.
So basically, we're throwing plastic all over the place, and it's breaking down. And what's happening is that these little particles that we now know as microplastics are making their way into the water. They're making their way into the soil, and they're being taken up by animals through eating in the waters, all bodies of waters at this point. So you have the ocean, you have the lakes, you have the ponds, and I believe they're also being taken up by plants. However, I haven't done enough research to figure this out. And so because of this, we are actually digesting, taking these things in, and they're also having side effects on us as well. We have also been told that these microplastics, which we now have in our shirts and our car, also have a problem. They have an effect on our respiratory system where they actually cause us breathing issues. And so this is like all over the environment. It's like the new lead problem.
Have you heard about this, Frosty?
I haven't heard about the respiratory, but there's no question that's exactly, Solon said it. The plastics are breaking down, and they're actually going into the animal tissue of fish. They're certainly breaking down and going into the tissue of cows, of pigs, of just about every creature that exists on the planet, and deer in the woods because of plastic bags that at some point finally break down, and then they're in the soil and they're in the grass and they get eaten by all these different creatures. And again, this is something that I've said. Plastics will prove the worst, most insidious, pernicious invention of humanity. Plastics kill everything and anything in their path on all four corners of the planet. Plastics kill without violence, without warning, and without provocation. Plastics float, sink, and never break down. And when they do, they literally become a detrimental particle of the entire Earth ecology. Of all of humanity's folly on this green planet, plastics take the trophy for man's inhumanity to all other life on Earth.
So, why are we doing plastics? Is a lot of money being made from plastics?
A lot of money is being made, and virtually, I would say somewhere close to 50% of everything we purchase for clothing today, or in our cars today, or in our products today, virtually everything is made of plastics. And without any responsibility toward the natural world. And again, it's just like all of the tires that are just being tossed everywhere. It's like all the trailers, all the mobile homes, once they're done, they just toss them into the woods. We are a very irresponsible society, and most other societies are very irresponsible also. And this is going to come back to bite us in many more ways than we even appreciate today.
So, go ahead.
Can I add something? Probably one of the biggest things with these microplastics. Two things to say. For one thing, they're very cheap. It's one of the reasons why they're all over the place is because these things are a lot cheaper. Because I don't know if you know this, but there's lots of projects where they're trying to clean up the ocean, and what they're doing is they're also breaking these things back down into some of these microplastics, and then they're reusing them. So we're actually taking them from one form and turning it into another one, and this other one is actually worse.
So we take plastics, we recycle them, and when we recycle them, they're more dangerous than they were originally.
When they get turned into microplastics, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because they can actually penetrate through the skin. I mean, we were just realizing what we're doing, and I feel like when it's too late, it's just going to be all over the place. I mean, they're going to lead to all kinds of health issues based off of this contact node.
I concur with that totally. 100% concur.
When did we start using plastics? In the 30s?
Pretty much 1965 with the movie with Dustin Hoffman. What was it called? Dustin Hoffman played the Graduate.
Oh, okay.
Remember in the thing and he was just graduated from college, and he was having an affair with Anne Bancroft, and the guy came up and he said, "Listen," to Dustin Hoffman, he said, "You got to get into plastics, man. Plastics. That's the future of America."
Yeah.
And that essentially was the beginning of massive use of plastics. Before that, we always used paper bags for our trash cans. We always did everything else with paper. But as soon as then McDonald's came in and started having plastic straws, plastic cups, and then styrofoam containers, it just took off, and it has not slowed down ever since.
Well, I'd just like to add, based off of what I have in front of me, it kind of started with the fluorescent tubes and certain motor parts.
Mm-hmm.
But massive, I don't know, but I just know that's some plastics.
So if we were going to stop using plastics, what could we replace them with?
Well, what you could replace them with is just go back to the basic metals. You could go back to basic wood. You could go back. There's always alternatives, and so that's what we could go back to, or we could move toward alternatives to plastics. But at this point, I don't think the human race has enough. The leaders of the human race, certainly the scientists and all the way down the line, simply don't have enough grasp or care or concern to take action to go away from plastics or create plastics from corn oil or hemp or other, products where the plastics wouldn't do so much damage, or the fact is we've known the Great Pacific Garbage Patch for well over 20 years when Oprah Winfrey brought it out, and we have done nothing. There has been nothing done to stop the plastification of the oceans or the lakes or the rivers. You're just now seeing a few governments, like in California, outlaw the plastic bag, but they don't outlaw the plastic hamburger box. They're just not outlawing all the things that are getting tossed into the environment. So I'm not particularly optimistic that we're going to change course and all of a sudden become a responsible species.
Is styrofoam also very bad? Is it plastic?
Oh yeah. It's horrible.
Same thing, basically.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's all plastic,
okay,
and it breaks up into little pieces, and the birds eat it. You name it. It's unbelievable. Yeah, styrofoam's just a nightmare.
Huh. So at least there are certain people that are trying to get it out of the environment, right? Like the one guy that we talked about, Boyan. What's his name? Boyan.
Boyan Slate, a Dutch boy.
Yeah.
There's also, it's called 4ocean.org. That's just the number 4, OCEAN, 4ocean. 2 surfers, and I've joined their club. It's on my Facebook page. But they're out cleaning up. For $20, you get a little bracelet of reconstituted plastic, and they're going into coves, and they're going into beaches, and they're going all over the world, 28 countries now, and they're actually paying fishermen to go out and snag all the plastic, and they pay them.
That's great.
Yeah, they pay them, and so the fishermen are now not fishing the fish, but they're fishing for the plastics, and they're making more money. And there's people have been given huge amount of money. You can just go to the website and you'll see it, and I highly recommend it. We got to start somewhere,
right?
And these 2 surfers are doing a heck of a job. But again, in the end, the only way to solve this is a massive recycling program with 25-cent deposit return law nationally and internationally, to give that incentive for everybody to pick that plastic up wherever it is and bring it to a collection place so that we can responsibly deal with plastic. Otherwise, what's going on right now, I am not sure how much longer these oceans are going to survive this. I know the wildlife, the marine life, the avian life is being killed by the multiple millions out there on the oceans.
So we're trying to take plastic out of the ocean, but we haven't been able to stop putting it in, right?
Right, correct.
So that's the next place we need to start somehow.
That's exactly right. The human race is this plastic thing. When we poison these oceans beyond, and we destroy all the reefs, and we destroy all the eco systems of the oceans, and all these poor animals out there, they just keep refeeding on all of the plastic. Again, there's one of my chapters is, I think it's chapter 12. You go to Midway Island, and all of the frigate birds and all of the waved albatross and all the other birds, they're all dying because every one of the chicks and every one of the birds, they're eating all the plastic caps. They're eating big lighters. They're eating toothbrushes that are floating, because all these animals have no clue what all this stuff is. It's just a bright colored piece of plastic, and they swallow it. That's what they do. And they're dying by the millions right out there in Midway. I could send you that chapter, and you can just look it up. Just look at the Midway Plastics YouTube, but I'll send you my YouTube of it, and you see all these chicks just choking in their nests, and their parents choking, and they're all choking on all these bottle caps and Bic lighters and pieces of plastic and fractured plastic that's been floating on the ocean, and they take it up as food, and they die. It's just horrible.
That would be the one thing I would say that Trump probably would not pay enough attention to, just kind of knowing him.
I would say that's true. The man's my age, but he lacks. He's always. You have to understand that Trump has always been a very rich man.
Right.
And his father was rich, and And I'm sending you the pictures of this plastic right now, Mark, so you can see it in this chapter 9. But somebody like Trump, and most, I mean, somebody like a Maxine Waters, and somebody like a Schumer, and somebody like a Cory Gardner, somebody like a Michael Bennet, all these senators and House members. Feinstein, she doesn't know what the heck's going on. She's just too old. She's not. You have to be. I mean, and when you get the email that I just sent you with the chapter 9, look at that third or fourth photograph where that kid is walking down the beach, and there's a million pieces of plastic he's walking through.
Oh.
But anyway, these people that are leading this country, they don't understand. I mean, they don't have a clue. I'm sure that Trump has never scuba dived. Well, I've scuba dived all over the world. I saw this firsthand. So that's why you hear the passion in my voice over this, but also just the total exasperation of why haven't we done something in the last 20 years to stop flooding the oceans with plastic? And what's the simplest way to do it? 25-cent deposit return law, or even a 50-cent deposit return law. I don't care what we charge, but it's got to be something significant so people will be incentive driven to bring back that plastic, pick up that plastic, and save ourselves from this horrific scourge across the planet, and that's plastic.
You know, when I think about people like Nancy Pelosi, and when she speaks, sometimes she has these big gaps where she kind of loses her train of thought. So
Sure.
This is the problem. Like a lot of our politicians, you know, they're not going to understand, period.
Well, there's no question. And again, you know, Dianne Feinstein is like, I think she's either 78 or 88.
Oh.
I think she's 88 and she's going to be 94 by the time she finally gets done with this next 6-year, Senate deal. I'll have to look it up, but she's either 78 or I think she might be 88. She's just an old woman. She's got cognitive decline. It's like, why do we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the highest court in the land making unbelievable decisions when she doesn't have the intellectual capacity at that age to be making these horrific votes on situations that we're all facing? That's why, again, we should have these term limits to get rid of all these people who are just total deadwood in the Congress of the United States. It floors me, and it floors me why none of the CNN won't pick up the plastics deal. Neither will Fox. None of them, and yet it's more important about what's going on and more devastating in the oceans right now than any of the other stuff that's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Dianne Feinstein's 85. And,
okay.
And Maxine,
so she'll be over 90 when she finally gets out of the Senate of the United States.
Unbelievable. Maxine Waters is another one. Goodness sakes. How did she get elected?
Well, her constituents are just as dumb as she is, because she's right in an area where they vote her in. They just keep. Same with John Lewis. John Lewis over there in Georgia. His constituents keep voting him in because there's nobody else, and they vote because of race, not because of intelligence, not because of critical thinking, not because of somebody that has done something. They just vote and revote the same dead weight back into the House membership, and you go, what? That Cortez girl. Oh my God! They actually have interviews with her there. I think Kumo on CNN has interviewed her, and he's got to be sitting there laughing. I think she was even interviewed on 60 Minutes. And if I was sitting here and I was the journalist interviewing her, I'd intellectually want to vomit, because she's such an airhead. And yet
she'll get elected, though. She'll get elected.
She got elected. Yeah.
Yeah, she'll be popular.
I mean, honest to God, I bet you that Cortez has never read the U.S. Constitution. I would lay 10 years' wages that she has never, ever read the U.S. Constitution. Doesn't know a damn thing about it. But she does know that the three branches of the U.S. government are the President, the House, and the Senate.
John
I rest
Lewis.
my case.
John Lewis, you talk. He's 78. But isn't Bernie Sanders is now 77, right?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. The thing is, and it's so funny because Bernie Sanders virtually never worked a day in his life. He was just an old hippie, and he just goofed off. And finally, he says, "Well, I'm going to run for Senate." And the goofball, he ran, and now he's been in the Senate for God knows how long. I think he's been in for 20 years.
Wow.
You sit there and you go, what are we doing to ourselves? Keep electing these people. Again, it was Einstein who said, the problems in the world today are so enormous, they cannot be solved with the level of thinking that created them. Why would you think that a Bernie Sanders is going to solve the problems that he hasn't solved in 20 years in the Senate of the United States, or a Maxine Waters, or a Dianne Feinstein? They're not capable of solving them. It's like trying to. It's like having a Volkswagen in the Indianapolis 500. Sure, it's got 4 engines, 4 cylinders, and it goes around the track, but it can't keep up with the Formula One racers that are going 200 miles an hour. That's why you need term limits. You got to have new minds, new energy, new creativity in the Senate and the House of the United States of America to solve what we're facing. Because what we're facing, the same old politicians are the ones that we're in the mess we're in right now, because they keep doing the same thing they did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
So Hillary, I think she's 71 now, and there's talk of her trying to run again.
If Hillary runs again, I think she'll be drubbed. And because she's just too old. She's not in physical condition, very good physical condition whatsoever. And the presidency would just beat her up. I can't imagine anybody wanting to have a 73-year-old woman who's really pretty much, she's duplistic. She's got so much baggage. She's got Benghazi. She's got, she was a terrible Secretary of State, and she did a lot of things that, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I think she would be just burned out. The fresh people are going to come in, and she would not hold up against some of the fresher Democratic faces.
She was actually periodically collapsing during the last, her.
That's correct.
Yeah, every once in a while she would just kind of collapse.
Totally collapse. That's correct.
Yeah, and there was some times where she would, when she was trying to talk, she would look like she was almost having a stroke or something.
Yeah, possibly mini strokes. Well, the thing is, she's so duplistic. I don't care. She enabled a sexual predator, her husband, Bill Clinton, to have affairs with over 42 different women who have charged him with sexual abuse and so forth. I'm sorry, that is not integrity. The one thing is, you can all the way down the line. I'm 72 years old. In fact, today, 26th of January, I came into the world in 1947. But anyway, I have nothing in my background. I have always made my mom and dad proud. I have nothing to be embarrassed. I've certainly made mistake here, there, and everywhere. I've had a couple of speeding tickets in my lifetime. I wish I'd have done a few other different things that it would have been a little bit just a better choices. But I am not embarrassed. I don't have to cover myself. I don't have to do anything to cover up my tracks. I don't have the Clinton Foundation's got more corruption in that thing. She was buying favors and taking money as a Secretary of State. I'm sorry, that kind of behavior is not a behavior of a person who has integrity. And in the end, she shouldn't be up there, because she's a woman that has no integrity, and especially with her sexual predator husband. I don't know why anybody would want to think she would be something worth following or having as the president of the United States.
And when she worked for the Rose Law Firm, weren't her and Bill actually part of that whole thing where they were running drugs up from South America through, what was the name of the city where Bill was? I can't remember exactly right now.
Wasn't it she was involved in a whitewater scam.
That was that was the real estate thing, but
real estate, the real estate scam.
But they were running drugs with the CIA, and they would fly the CIA, and I forget the name of the agent. I'd have to look it up in the Clinton's War on Women. And they would land it was a prop plane, and they would take the cocaine out, and then I guess the CIA people would come up and take it away. But they were laundering that money through the Rose law firm that Hillary worked at.
Yeah, well, and she was also kicked off the Watergate law firm because she was literally kicked out because of lying and underhanded and unlawful activity. So, I mean, she's just got a history of being a corrupt individual.
Yeah, people do not realize how profound this corruption is. It's really, really over the top.
Well, it is. And you have to understand that all extremists, whether it's in the athletics with like the guy that won the Tour de France all those times and got him. Yeah, Lance Armstrong. I mean, he was a doper. He was cheating, and of course they were all cheating.
Right.
But he was the biggest cheater. But I'm sorry, if you cheat, that means you have no integrity. And I'm sorry, that doesn't work in my book because I've raced all sorts of mountain bike races. I've raced in criteriums. I've certainly raced in the triathlons, over 80 of them in my life. I didn't cheat. I didn't come in first, but I came in and I finished the races. And I can say, hey, I did a fair race. I trained hard and I did the best I could. And so the same thing with all these politicians, the ones that cheat. What was that guy from Texas? Delay? He was just the biggest cheater on the block. I would imagine if we really got a hold of Mitch McConnell, that guy's done a few really, really underhanded stuff in his little career up there as a never-ending career corrupt politician. So these extremists, they're up for a lot of power, and sure enough, they're going to cheat and do whatever they can to get into the power position and or maintain it. And that's kind of the way it goes, and it's unfortunate that we don't have more integrity.
Yeah, I think the agent, the CIA guy, was named Barry Seal, who was flying the drugs, and maybe it was Little Rock. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, Little Rock, yeah.
Yeah, and but eventually the Barry Seal got assassinated. He became a liability because he knew.
Right. Well, there's been a few besides him that got liabilities, and I remember they ended up in plane crashes.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, it's this whole unbelievable story of corruption that people would never. It's Mena, Arkansas. Maybe that's where they would fly the aircraft from South America into Mena, Arkansas. And it's a long, long story, and money laundering and drugs, and so people don't really even know the real dirt story on the whole Clintons thing. And I think
I read Jennifer Flowers, one of his lovers, while he was there in the Arkansas White House, and Jennifer Flowers was his lover for I don't know a decade or so, and she wrote Betrayal, and I read the book. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the police officers in the state patrol would drive him off from the Arkansas legislature, where his office was, and drive him over to her to have the affair twice a week. It's just like, what?
Yeah, it was just part of a regular operation, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and your tax dollars are paying for the state patrol, and they're remaining quiet, but. Then you look at JFK. He was out having affairs left and right. Poor Jackie was taking care of the kids, and JFK was having affairs with Marilyn Monroe, and that's been documented. He had a 19-year-old intern. Talk about a pre-Monica Lewinsky. I didn't get the book, but the lady just 2 years ago came out with the book, and the kind of sexual crap that was going on in the White House swimming pool was like, whoa.
Really?
That's over my pay grade, I'll tell you. But that was JFK and the Camelot, and yet it was not such a integrous situation. And JFK was quite the nasty sexual person that was cheating on his wife and being a very unintegrous person. I would not sit down to dinner with somebody like that because it's just not what I would do.
There we go, Frosty. I think that's the music. Thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
So long. Thank you for